The first TOUCH the year was 3095, and planet Solara 7 floated quietly in Sector 9 of the galaxy. Its skies were always purple, its cities shining with silver towers and clean energy. Aliens known as the Zylarians lived here, peaceful, advanced, and proud of their order. They had one strong rule: never touch a human. Humans were rare on Zylara, and most were not welcome. The old story said humans were chaotic, emotional, and dangerous. To protect themselves, every Zylarian wore a small device on their wrist, a Soulmate Detector. It could sense soul connections glowing softly near loved ones. But when it sensed true soulmates, it would pulse, shine, even burn with energy. Lyra's detector had never reacted to anyone. Lyra was a young Zylarian tech engineer. She worked in the Interplanetary Communications Lab, where she repaired alien tech and studied deep signals. She believed in logic, in science, and in silence. She didn't believe in soulmates or fairy tales or feelings. One quiet morning, her work was interrupted by an emergency call. A human ship had crash-landed just outside the city. Only one survivor was found, a male human, unconscious but alive. The government took him to the medical zone, locking down the area. Later that day, Lyra was called to scan the ship's remains. She walked through the wreckage in her silver suit, her detector silent on her wrist. The human's things were scattered, strange and messy. She rolled her eyes. Humans were always careless. She entered the control room of the ship, alone. As she reached out to scan the command console, she heard a soft sound behind her. Turning quickly, she saw him. The human was awake, weak, and barely standing. His dark eyes met hers for a split second before he stumbled forward. Lyra froze, but before she could move, his hand brushed against her arm. It was a light touch, but enough. Her soulmate detector exploded with light. It pulsed red, then gold, then white-hot, heating up fast. Lyra gasped, stumbling backward, eyes wide with shock. The human collapsed again, unconscious. Lyra stared at her wrist in disbelief. The detector was shaking, glowing wildly, reacting like it had never done before. She looked at the human on the ground. What just happened? Why would the detector go crazy from a human's touch? It was impossible. Humans were supposed to be outside the soulmate system. They didn't belong to the network. They were emotionally unstable, incompatible, not soul-matchable. That's what the elders had always taught. But this human had changed everything with just one touch. Footsteps echoed behind her. Security had arrived. She quickly pulled her sleeve over the detector, hiding the glow. They lifted the human and carried him away. He didn't open his eyes again. Lyra stood frozen, heart beating too fast. She had always lived by rules, always trusted facts, but now her body was trembling, her mind racing. She couldn't explain what had just happened. Later that night, she sat alone in her small apartment. She placed her wrist on the table and uncovered the detector. It was still warm, still glowing softly. Like it was alive. No one else in her life had ever triggered it. Not her friends, not her coworkers, not anyone. Just one human, one accidental touch. She didn't even know his name, but her detector had recognized something deeper, something real. She replayed the moment again and again in her head. The human's eyes tired, lost but full of something she couldn't explain. And then a strange thought entered her mind. What if everything they were told about humans was wrong? What if humans could bond, even more strongly than anyone imagined? She knew she couldn't talk to anyone about this. Not yet. The government would shut it down, erase it, hide it. No one would believe her. They would say her detector was broken or corrupted. But Lyra knew what she felt, and tomorrow, she would find a way to see that human again. Not because she trusted him. Not because she was curious, but because her detector for the first time ever had come alive. And it didn't lie. *Forbidden's connection. They said it was just a glitch, a device malfunction, a technical error caused by stress or fear. But Lyra knew the truth. Her soulmate detector hadn't glitched. It had chosen since the incident. Lyra couldn't sleep. Her mind kept going back to the human's eyes. That single touch, that sudden heat in her wrist, the way the detector pulsed like a heartbeat. Her own heartbeat. Official reports said the human, now confirmed to be named Cade Marlowe, was being kept under strict observation. He was stable, silent, and surrounded by guards. No visitors allowed, no exceptions, but Lyra was never good at following rules. Not when the rules didn't make sense. Not when the rules tried to erase the truth. At midnight, she entered the lab archives using her private access code. The lights were dim, the air cold and still. She pulled up classified data on the Soulmate detection system. Files flashed on the screen. Glowing diagrams, heartbeat patterns, compatibility charts. Nowhere did it mention humans. Nowhere did it say this kind of reaction was possible. And yet, it had happened. Lyra dug deeper into older hidden files. There she found something strange, a name, Dr. Selin Variz, a Zylarian scientist who had once studied human emotional depth. Her last project had been mysteriously shut down. Her final paper was titled, The Unmeasurable Bond Soul Resonance Beyond Species. The document was restricted. Lyra bypassed the block with a risky override. Inside were logs, scans, and personal notes. Dr. Variz believed humans had untapped emotional frequencies. She wrote that a human soul pattern could cause unpredictable reactions in detectors. She believed that one day, a human and a Zylarian would form a true bond, a soulmate bond. But after her final report, Dr. Variz vanished. No one spoke of her again. Lyra leaned back, her hands shaking slightly. Was she becoming part of the thing everyone feared? Was Cade the one the detector had waited for? The next day, Lyra made her move. She disguised herself as a medical tech and entered the restricted zone. No one questioned her, not with her calm walk and forged ID chip. She entered the human's room and saw him lying there, awake this time. Cade turned his head slowly. Eyes locking onto hers, there was no fear in his expression, only curiosity. You, he said softly, his voice rough and tired. You were on my ship. Lyra nodded, staying a few steps away. Do you remember what happened? She asked. Cade frowned. I touched your arm, he whispered, and something hit me. Like lightning. Lyra looked at her wrist, her detector now calm, pulsing like a heartbeat. I need answers, she said. Cade smiled weakly. So do I. There was a pause, thick with unspoken things. Then he said, when I touched you, it felt like something unlocked. I've never felt that before. Lyra stepped closer, heart pounding. Neither have I, she said. Suddenly, alarms echoed through the halls. Unauthorized presence detected. She had stayed too long. Before leaving, she reached out, just for a second, and touched his hand. The detector burst to life again, glowing bright gold. Cade's eyes widened. Lyra pulled away and ran, slipping out just as security closed in. Back at her apartment, she sat in the dark. Her detector was still warm. Her soul was still trembling. She had broken the law. But something deeper had begun, something more powerful than any rule. And in that moment, Lyra understood one thing clearly. This was no accident. It was the beginning of something forbidden, and she wasn't ready to let it go. Soul signal. The Soulmate detector didn't sleep. Even when Lyra tried to forget, it kept pulsing, slow and steady, like a quiet voice calling out from her wrist. It wasn't just a device anymore. It felt alive each time she looked at it. She saw the same message blinking on the screen. Connection detected. Unregistered frequency. She had checked the readings again and again. The frequency came from one source only. Cade Marlowe. The human. She wasn't supposed to feel this. She wasn't supposed to want to feel this. But no matter how much she tried to stay away, the signal only grew stronger, and she wasn't the only one feeling it. Across the city, locked inside a guarded chamber, Cade sat on his narrow bed. He stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. He wasn't a soldier, or a spy, or a scientist. He was just a transport pilot who took the wrong job. But ever since he touched her, something in him had changed. His dreams were filled with colors he couldn't explain. A voice, not hers, but like hers, kept whispering to him in flashes of memory he didn't own. His heartbeat sometimes matched a rhythm that wasn't his. He felt drawn to her like gravity pulling a comet out of orbit. Late that night, Lyra did something unthinkable. She connected her detector to a private console and broke into the system code. She bypassed the warning screens and found a hidden layer, something only engineers could access, a forgotten archive called Project Heartline. It was created over 200 years ago by Dr. Selin Varese, the same scientist who studied human bonding. Her final research wasn't erased, it was buried. Lyra's eyes widened as she read. The Soulmate Detector was never designed to exclude humans. It was designed to hide them. The early models had detected strong emotional links between humans and Zylarians, but the government feared it. They feared mixed bonds, cross-species love, and loss of control. So they rewrote the detectors, changed the signals, and erased all records of human compatibility. Her whole life had been a lie. Her people were taught to fear humans, not because they were dangerous, but because they were too powerful to bond with, too real, too unpredictable, and now it was happening again. With her, with Khalid, she had to tell him, but she also had to move fast. Her activity on the system had already triggered alerts. The authority would know someone had accessed Heartline. They would come for her, and maybe for him. Lyra slipped out of her tower apartment. Blending into the night streets, the stars above seemed brighter than usual. Or maybe she was just awake for the first time in her life. She reached the medical zone, using a secret entrance she once repaired. Inside, she found Cade sitting on his bed, waiting, almost like he knew she would come. "You felt it, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Cade nodded slowly. "I don't know what's happening, but I know it started with you." Lyra took a step closer, raising her wrist. "Touch my hand again," she said. He hesitated, then reached forward. Their hands met, and the detector lit up like a sunrise. Brilliant gold, warm, alive. Then something new happened. A glowing mark appeared just above their skin. Two halves of a circle, one on each of them. They matched perfectly. Cade stared in shock. "What is that?" Lyra whispered. "A soul signal. A rare one. Some say it only appears when the bond is real, beyond species, beyond design." In that moment, neither of them spoke. But something inside them both felt full, like two puzzle pieces clicking into place. Then, an alarm blared in the building. Security had found her entry path. Lyra grabbed Cade's hand. "No more waiting," she said. "We run." As they escaped into the cold neon night, their connected wrists still glowing, Lyra knew this wasn't just a mistake of fate. It was a signal, and she was done ignoring it. The escape plan had started with a heartbeat, not Lyra's, not Cade's, but the detector's. The glowing device on her wrist pulsed faster than ever before. It didn't warn her, it didn't guide her, it simply begged her to run. The city of Zalara 7 had never felt so dangerous. Neon lights flickered across rooftops as drones zipped overhead. Scanning for fugitives, every screen flashed red alerts, showing two faces, hers and Cade's, a traitor and a human. Inside a quiet tunnel beneath the city, Lyra and Cade stood in silence. Their hands still bore the glowing soul mark from their second touch. The mark had not faded, if anything. It had grown clearer, brighter, like it was alive. Cade looked at her wrist. "Is this what they're really afraid of?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "Not humans," she said, "but this connection. A bond they can't control." Cade let out a small laugh. "Tired and amazed. Of all the planets in all the galaxies, I crash into yours. And you just happen to be my soulmate." She looked at him, serious. "There's no just happen about this." But they didn't have time to wonder. The Soulmate Detector flashed another signal. Incoming patrol. They had 10 minutes, maybe less. Lyra turned toward the abandoned transport bay. She had worked here years ago, fixing old ships no one used anymore. There was one vessel, rusty, slow, but hidden beneath the floor. If they could reach it, they might escape orbit. The plan was dangerous. The route was broken, and Lyra didn't know if the ship could even fly. But something had shifted inside her since she met Cade, the girl who once followed rules and trusted logic. She was gone. Now she was someone who would risk everything for one impossible chance. They moved quickly through the lower sector. Cade limped slightly, still healing, but kept pace. They didn't speak much. Words felt too small for what they were facing. They reached the old launch zone, covered in dust and shadows. Lyra activated the underground lift, revealing a hidden hangar. Inside sat a forgotten spacecraft. Shaped like a fallen star. She turned to Cade. "If this doesn't work," he interrupted, "then we die. But I'd rather die running with you than be locked in a cage without you." Her eyes softened. No one had ever chosen her before, not like this. She climbed into the cockpit, fingers flying across controls she hadn't touched in years. Sparks flew, engines coughed, lights flickered. Cade joined her, pulling safety straps tight. Above them, motion sensors detected heat. Alarms sounded. The Authority had found them. Lyra slammed the ignition. The ship roared, rising violently from the ground. Metal creaked, systems blinked warnings, but it flew. Chasers launched from nearby towers. Sleek ships built for speed. Lyra swerved hard, dodging lasers that lit up the night sky. Cade watched the stars blur outside the window, and then, through all the chaos, a new light appeared. The Soulmate Detector glowed white. Not hot, not pulsing, just steady, like a calm heartbeat under pressure. A sign, a message. They were on the right path. As the ship broke past the final barrier and entered open space, Lyra took a breath. Her first real breath in days. No walls, no rules, no lies, just her, Cade, and a future not written by others. They didn't speak for a moment, just watched the stars. Finally, Cade whispered, "You know this doesn't end here, right? They'll come after us." Lyra smiled. "Then let them come, because now..." She wasn't running from something. She was running towards something. And the detector on her wrist, once cold, once silent, now glowed like it had found home. The truth about the detectors: not all truths are meant to stay buried. Some wait in silence, forgotten in dusty files and abandoned halls. Others beat beneath your skin, waiting for the right touch to wake them up. For Lyra, the truth was now pulsing. Through her wrist, the Soulmate Detector no longer felt like a tool. It felt like a compass, and it was pointing her toward the past. They had escaped the planet, but not the questions, not the quiet weight pressing on their bond. What was this? Connection, really? And why had her people hidden it for centuries? Their stolen ship drifted in deep orbit, invisible to scanners. Inside, Cade worked to repair the damaged nav system, while Lyra searched for something far harder to fix: the truth. She plugged her wrist device into the ship's archive system. Something in her detector had changed during their escape. New files appeared, ones she had never seen before. Old system codes, fragments of locked data, voice logs from the creators. One voice returned again and again: Dr. Selin Varize. She had been more than a scientist. She had been a believer. A believer in something dangerous, something beautiful. Lyra listened to one log over and over. It said, "Soulmate energy is not limited by species, race, or biology. It is resonance, a match between frequencies of two living beings. Humans test higher than any species we've studied, including our own." The first detectors glowed white when they touched humans, but then the logs turned darker. Another voice entered the records. A government official, cold and firm: "Seal the project. Rewrite the detectors to filter out humans. If our people knew they could bond with an outsider, it would break everything we built." Lyra sat still for a long time. The lights of the ship reflected in her eyes. They hadn't protected her from humans. They had protected the system from the truth. She showed Cade the recordings as he listened. His jaw tightened. "So we were never the danger," he said quietly. "We were just the unpredictable factor." Lyra nodded. "They weren't afraid we'd fall in love," she said. "They were afraid it would work." For a moment, neither of them said anything. Their hands rested on the table, side by side, close enough to feel. The warmth without needing touch. Then Cade whispered, "So what do we do now?" Lyra didn't answer right away. She stared at the stars outside the window. Thousands of them. Cold, distant, silent. Just like her world had been before he came crashing into it. "I need to find the original lab," she said. "The place where the first detectors were made, if we can show the truth. Maybe others will listen." Cade raised an eyebrow. "You think the same people who hid this will suddenly care?" "No," Lyra replied, "but the people deserve to choose." They set a new course, a dark, quiet moon where Dr. Varese had once built her private research station. It was off-grid, almost erased from maps, but Lyra had found traces of it. In the detector's memory, as if the device itself remembered its true origin. The journey would take 3 days, long hours filled with silence, stories, and soft glances. They talked about Earth, about Solara, about how love was explained differently on both. But in the end, neither of them had ever truly understood it. Not until now, on the second night. Lyra asked a question that had been burning in her mind. "Did you feel it too?" Cade looked at her. "That first time we touched?" "Yeah," he said softly. "I didn't understand it, but it felt like coming home." Lyra turned away quickly, pretending to adjust the ship controls. But her eyes shimmered, just for a second, and the detector on her wrist blinked once, soft and slow, like it was smiling. They didn't need more proof. They were the proof. But now they had to make the universe see it too. Because a love like theirs wasn't an error. It was the missing piece. The part someone tried to erase. But truth has a heartbeat, and this time, it refused to be silenced. Asterisk hunted. The silence of space can feel peaceful, until it starts to feel like a trap. 3 days into their journey, peace was shattered. Lyra and Cade had just passed the shadow belt of the outer ring, when the ship's radar blinked red, once, twice, then steady. They were being followed not by one, but by 3 high-speed authority ships, faster, newer, and fully armed. The Soulmate Detectors might have been designed to find love, but the ones chasing them were built to kill. Cade stood at the cockpit window, watching the lights in the distance grow closer. He didn't need advanced tech to know what was coming. "They're not just tracking us," he said. "They're hunting us." Lyra didn't answer. Her hands moved quickly across the controls, rerouting power, locking coordinates. Her face calm, but her eyes told the truth. She was scared, and not for herself. "We won't outrun them in this ship," she said, "but we can still make it to the lab." Below them, hidden within the crust of a dead moon, was their destination. Dr. Varus's abandoned lab, the only place left with records that could prove everything: the truth about the detectors, the truth about soul bonds, the truth about them. Lyra looked at Cade. "If we don't make it, and they erase us, it all ends here." Cade met her gaze. "Then we don't let them catch us." She smiled faintly. "I have one plan left." It wasn't a good plan, but it was all they had. She transferred all the research, the data logs, the heartbeat recordings, into a storage core embedded in her detector. If anything happened to them, the core could survive. It would carry the truth to whoever found it next. Outside, the authority ships closed in. They fired a warning shot, bright and loud, too close for comfort. "This is your final chance." A voice echoed through their ship's comms. "Turn over the human and surrender the device." Lyra didn't respond. Cade leaned closer. "I'm not letting them take you," he said. "And I'm not letting them take us," she replied. She set the ship into a nosedive, speeding toward the surface of the moon. The old research station blinked on her map, barely powered, nearly. "Lost to time. Hold on," she said. They crashed through thick clouds of dust. Systems failing, alarms screaming, but just before impact, Lyra activated the emergency shield. The ship slammed into the crater. Rough but alive, metal groaned. Lights flickered. They made it barely. Cade stumbled out first, coughing through the ash-filled air. Lyra followed, holding the storage core close to her chest. Behind them, the enemy ships landed, silent and smooth, like shadows with wings. They won't wait this time. Cade said. Lyra nodded. Then we don't run anymore. They found the lab entrance hidden beneath layers of stone. Lyra used her detector to unlock it. The old system still recognized the signal. Doors hissed open, revealing a long corridor, cold and untouched. Inside were the last words of a scientist no one wanted to remember. Dr. Varus's voice echoed through the halls. Love is not a risk to civilization. It is the reason civilizations exist. The message played again and again, like it had waited all these years just to be heard. Cade stepped beside her. They're almost here, he whispered. Lyra took a deep breath. She pressed her detector against the main terminal, the truth. Uploaded in seconds, the lights in the lab turned from red to green. Transmission active. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone would now know. But the doors slammed open, and in came the soldiers. Cold armor, glowing weapons, no mercy. Lyra and Cade backed into the heart of the lab. Surrounded, outnumbered but not afraid, because in that moment, they weren't fugitives, they were the proof. And even if they fell, their bond would not. The detector on Lyra's wrist shined bright gold one last time. A light so strong, even the soldiers hesitated. It wasn't a weapon, but it struck deeper than any gun. A signal sent across space. Loud, clear, undeniable. Love is real, and it cannot be hunted. Her choice in the end. The galaxy did not explode. No war began, no grand speech was made. Just a choice, made by one girl and witnessed by 1,000 stars. The soldiers had surrounded them. Lyra and Cade stood back to back inside the heart of the forgotten lab. The Soulmate Detector pulsed between them, glowing like a second sun. But the soldiers didn't fire, because something had changed. Outside the lab, across Zylara's skies, something rare had happened. The hidden transmission had reached the surface. Screens across the city lit up with forbidden footage. Dr. Selin Varus's research, the suppressed data, the soul bond recordings, and a live feed of Lyra and Cade, hand in hand, standing unbroken inside the truth. The people of Zylara watched in silence, watched as everything they believed began to shift. Back in the lab, a voice echoed through the coms. The authorities. Prime Director, calm but shaken. Lyra of Zylara, he said. You've defied the law, exposed sealed history, and endangered the system. But we will give you a choice. Lyra didn't move. Cade looked at her, eyes steady. The director continued. You may return home, alone. You will be forgiven, even honored. But the human stays behind. Cade didn't speak, he didn't beg. He simply stepped back, hands raised. I won't ask you to choose me, he said, because it has to be your choice. Lyra closed her eyes. She remembered the rules, the warnings, the promises she made to herself. She had always followed the path that was given, but now she saw that paths are not given. They are chosen, and sometimes they begin where the rules end. She opened her eyes, then turned to the panel. No, she said calmly. I won't leave him. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, one by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. Not by command, but by something older, something deeper. Recognition. They saw it. They felt it. The truth wasn't in the data. It was in the bond. A bond that could not be faked, could not be forced, could only be found. The Prime Director disconnected. No reply, no order. Just quiet outside. The people of Zylara gathered under their twin moons, watching the feed until it faded to black. Something inside them had shifted. A seed had been planted, later, far from the eyes of the world. Lyra and Cade sat beside the cliff edge of the moon. The stars looked different now, not distant, but close, like they were listening. Cade gently touched her hand. Was it worth it? He asked. Lyra smiled. I didn't lose my world. She whispered. I found ours. The detector on her wrist gave one soft final glow, then went quiet. Its job was done, because sometimes love doesn't need to be measured. It just needs to be chosen.